What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. Today we're doing our weekly budget build on Titania, Protector of Argoth. Before we get started, a little bit of self-promotion. If you guys would subscribe, that would really help me out. It's free and I'd love it if you did it. Alright, moving on. This girl has gotten a ton of tech throughout the years. We got the new Caperna lands, we got Conduit of Worlds, we got this behemoth guy, and it makes her a viable budget build at last. Additionally, this kind of ends up just building like a big Timmy deck. We're going to be casting a lot of big creatures, we're going to be smashing faced, and we're going to be ramping to the moon. So if that sounds like a deck tech you're into, let's get into it. Kicking off our first category, let's talk about how we can use Titania's ability to make some massive elementals. Harrow, Spring Bloom Druid, and Rolling Regrowth are all going to sacrifice a land and let us search for more than one land, essentially ramping us while just creating those elementals. Crop Rotation. This one's really good because it's going to allow us to search for a land, put it onto the battlefield, we can grab Evolving Wilds, and then we can sack Evolving Wilds. So we're going to get a total of 2 elementals off of this one card. Edge of Autumns is also a super solid card in the deck because early game it's going to ramp us and late game it's going to trigger Titania's ability and even draw us a card. We also run Blade of Selves and Mimic Vat just because of Titania's ETB, right? Blade of Selves, we're going to get 2 copies of her, they're going to die because of the legendary rule, but we'll still get the ETB and get those lands from our graveyard. Mimic Vat kind of works with the same scenario, right? We're going to go ahead and exile Titania under Mimic Vat. Now once per turn we'll get her ETB and we'll get those elementals onto the battlefield. Additionally, there are some other ETBs in the deck such as Spring Bloom Druid that can really benefit from Mimic Vat and Blade of Selves. Lastly, we have Zoran Orb. This one pairs really well with our next category, which is reanimating our lands from our graveyard. Conduit of Worlds and Perennial Behemoth are just going to straight up allow us to play our lands from our graveyard. Additionally, Conduit of Worlds is going to let us play 1 permanent per turn from our graveyard as long as we don't cast any other spells that turn. Splendid Reclamation and World Shaper are this effect on steroids. We're going to get all of the lands from our graveyard back onto the battlefield. Now you can kind of understand why Zoran Orb is in the deck. If we can sacrifice all our lands, then cast a Splendid Reclamation, we're going to create a ton of elementals, and then we just have a lot of power to swing out with. Additionally, there are a few ways to give our creatures haste in the deck, so that's just going to power it up. We also have some one-off effects such as Eternal Witness, Timeless Witness, and Regrowth, just in case we lose something in the graveyard and we need it back. Lastly, we do run Creeping Renaissance. This is just going to be a solid tool to get our lands back, our creatures back, whatever we need into our hand. Let's talk about the core of the deck. We run Guruk's Uprising, Elemental Bond, and Guruk's Pack Leader. This is your engine. Once we get one of these onto the battlefield, we're essentially drawing a card every time we sacrifice a land, which is going to be really good when we pair it with stuff like Rampaging Ballast as well, right? Now we're playing lands, drawing a cards. Whenever we sack a land, we're drawing a card. These 3 cards are essentially the engine of the deck and what keeps it going. Swiftfoot Boots is going to protect our commander, Staff of Titania. It'd be kind of weird not to include this card. I know it's kind of fallen out of budget, but honestly, I'd feel weird not including it in the deck because we can go ahead and sacrifice those 1/1s to create more elementals. Additionally, it's just ramp and it's going to make Titania massive. Abundance is super solid card selection. If we need a land, we can get a land. If we're searching for that sack land, if we need a creature, we get a creature. It's kind of nice just guaranteeing knowing what you're going to draw. Turvagon. I included this guy in the deck, 1, because he's got Trample, he's got that Ravenous ability, he replaces himself, and also he just can create a massive board state if they leave this guy alone. Nylea's Intervention is a solid card, you know you're going to get your sack lands. Additionally, it can work as removal in a pinch. Crashing Drawbridge is super solid in the deck, literally just for that haste ability. If we go ahead and sack all our lands, create a bunch of elementals, it kind of be messed up if we had to wait a whole turn before swinging. Yeah, the enemy's gonna board wipe and we're not gonna have anything left. Well, Crashing Drawbridge gets rid of that scenario because we can attack that turn and hopefully end the game. Additionally, Uvenwald Oddity can do this as well. It can give haste and trample, so it's a little better. We also run Dragon Throne of Tarkir and Kamal Heartakrosa. Kamal Heartakrosa is solid because it's going to give all of your creatures +3/+3 and trample. That's going to make your elementals have 8 power. Additionally, it can animate lands so we can swing those at opponents if we're just trying to take someone out. Dragon Throne's just a super solid card that catches people off guard and wins you the game. Now this one might be a little bit of a controversial include, but we do run Nature's Affinity. This is going to turn everybody's lands into 2/2 creatures. Half of the reasoning is if we're just trying to end the game with something like a Kamal or Dragon Throne of Tarkir, it's really good to have a bunch of creatures on the board. And now this is where it kind of gets crazy. If someone decides they want to wipe the board because we are in a favorable position, we can go ahead and cast it, turning everybody's lands into creatures, and everybody will have no lands after that. Now why would we do that? Because our commander is going to turn all of our lands into 5/3 elementals, and we will be in a state to win the game after that. We also run Azuri's Predation, so in a scenario where we can create 10 mana, cast this, and then Azuri's Predation, we're going to go ahead and create a ton of beasts, kill all of their lands, most of their creatures, and win the game after that. Just don't expect to make any friends doing this, you know? Moving on to card draw, we have Momentous Fall and Life's Legacy. We're going to be able to sacrifice those elementals to draw 5 cards, pretty decent. Additionally, we run Return of the Wild Speaker, Rishkar's Expertise, and Soul's Majesty. This just straight up lets us draw cards equal to a creature's power. Notably, we do have a lot of creatures that go higher than 5 in this deck, so the potential for these cards is insane. Additionally, we get a free spell off Rishkar's Expertise, and Return of the Wild Speaker can end the game in a niche scenario. Hunter's Insight and Hunter's Prowess can also have the potential to draw us a ton of cards. Beast Whisperer and Soul of the Harvest are solid engines in the deck as well, just because we do run a lot of creatures. Lastly, we do run Harmonize. This is a solid card draw spell. I mean, it is kind of crept out by some of the non-budget options, but in a budget, it's perfectly fine and does exactly what it needs to do. Moving on to ramp, we have a pretty good elf package. We run a total of 5 elves. We do this mostly because we want to get our commander out as soon as possible because of a lot of our land sacrifice themselves. So the faster we can get our commander onto the battlefield, the faster we can start generating the value and making those gears turn. Shigeki is going to be amazing in this deck because this guy is his own engine. Play him early, get your lands you need, and then later if you go ahead and put something into the graveyard that you didn't want to be there, he can even return it back to your hand. He's especially good at just digging and finding those sack lands so you can get your engine going, and that's all we want to do in the early game. Then we have your more standard stuff like Rampant Growth, Cultivate, and Nature's Lore. Secure Tribuilder, also really solid in this deck. I like Tireless Provisioner just because we can use those treasure tokens on later turns, and we are getting a lot of landfall triggers. Remember, a sack land's going to give you 2 landfall triggers because it enters, you sacrifice it, you get another land, 2 triggers. Druid Class, this is just going to straight up let us play additional lands. Additionally, it can make a huge beater whenever we bring it to that 3rd level. Finally, we have our removal. Beast Within and Reclamation Sage are just solid staple in any green deck. Fade from History is just a super budget Bane of Progress, which I'm here for, honestly. Worldbreaker can go ahead and get rid of anything that's pesky aside from creatures, and it can return itself from the graveyard by sacrificing a land. Check on removal and check on synergy. I love Aberrant because he's just a big beater that replaces himself and gets rid of those pesky enchantments and artifacts. Steelbane Hydra is also a super underrated card for getting rid of artifacts and enchantments. Nature's Claim, another super budget, super solid card. And finally, we have Kamal's Will. Not only can this go ahead and take out a creature, but it's going to animate all of our lands, turning it into another solid game-breaking card with those Dragon Throne of Tarkir and Kamal Heart of Krosa effects. That's going to do it for the Deck Tech Guides. Subscribe if you want more weekly budget builds, and leave a like, comment, let me know what you think about it, and as always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors.